Welcome to Marriage IQ, the podcast for the intelligent spouse.
I'm Dr. Heidi Hastings.
And I'm Dr. Scott Hastings.
We are two doctors, two researchers, two spouses, two lovers, and two incredibly different human beings coming together for one purpose: to transform the stinky parts of your marriage into scintillating ones, using intelligence mixed with a little fun. Hello, lovers, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Marriage IQ. We're really excited about what we're going to talk about today, but before we start, I want to couch it in some historical understanding of how Marriage IQ even came to be for those who may have not been listening our first or second episode. It's been a while now since we've talked about this, but in my PhD program, my research was on religious women who had experienced betrayal trauma. And through the research, one of the things that I was looking at was how betrayal impacted their sexuality, and published an article on that. So one of the findings that came out of that was, as the women had started to heal, they were really curious and mournful in a way about their sexual experience thus far, from the beginning of their marriage through betrayal and even through healing. And they wanted to understand what healthy sexuality was all about, what it was like, what a more intimate relationship might be like. And some of them dove into it and studied on their own. Some longed for it and wanted to learn about it. And it just really got me thinking about how important it is that we have discussions, open discussions, honest discussions on sexuality for women who may be a little more conservative, whether they're Christian, whether they're Muslim. Jewish women in my study tended to already have a better grasp on that. But for those who didn't, whether it's through religious scripts, whether it's through social scripts, whether it's through family narratives, whatever it is, we are proponents of having language of sexual agency that allow women to have the best sexual experiences, thus the marriage having better sexual experiences. And sometimes not only is it important for women to hear and understand these ideas, this language, learn this language, but also for their husbands. And so during this time, I was kind of poking around, looking for podcasts that would be able to help women who didn't want like wild and crazy ideas about sex, who wanted it within a perspective that they felt really comfortable with. And one of the podcasters that I found during that time was Amanda Lauder. And we're really excited to have Amanda join us on our show today. And thank you so much, Amanda, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're really looking forward to this conversation. So Amanda is a certified sex and marriage coach who helps Christian men and women specifically overcome their obstacles to create a more emotionally, mentally, and spiritually and physically intimate relationship. And I'm guessing you may even have people who aren't Christian, but who also have those more conservative morals that are looking for help in this area.
Yes, absolutely.
So Amanda's the host of the Sex for Saints podcast. Over 7 years now that she's been producing that podcast, over 1.5 million downloads, which we really look forward to that someday. That's really fantastic. So congratulations on that.
Thanks.
In addition to being a coach, Amanda is also a wife to Kevin and mom and stepmom to 5 kids. So you've got a busy life. Wow.
It's getting a little bit more calm. Our last 2 are at home. They're going to be seniors this year. So most of them have grown and flown the nest.
You are moving along.
Yes.
Right.
We're looking forward to being empty nesters.
It is so fun. Let us just tell you, we're 4 or 5 years in now, and it's such a fun time of life.
Look at us. We're doing podcasts.
Yeah. In Amanda's spare time, she also enjoys reading, watching her kids play sports, fishing, and camping.
Okay, Amanda, one thing we talk about here on Marriage IQ is identity. We want to learn a little bit about who you are and how this all came to be. I mean, not everyone turns into a marriage sex expert, right?
No.
So tell us about you in just a few minutes.
Okay. Well, I've always wanted to be a sex coach.
Mm.
I'm totally kidding. I really wasn't. So I grew up in a very loving conservative home where my parents really didn't talk to me about sex at all. I got
Shocking.
some really bad advice from my mom, but right before I got married the first time. And that kind of propelled me into some really bad patterns in my first marriage. So my first husband and I were married for 13 years, and it was a very hard marriage. There was a lot of emotional abuse. And the sex was a really hard part of our relationship as well. And so I would just basically do it whenever I had to get him off my back for a little while. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't have pleasure. I didn't experience an orgasm for 12 years. So it was a really hard part. And in an attempt to maybe help things get better overall in our marriage, I said, well, maybe if the sex gets better, then our marriage will get better. And so I decided to dig in and confront a lot of the shame that I felt around my sexuality. I didn't understand that that's what it was at the time. But one afternoon I was watching Oprah. This is back in the day when she was on network television. And she had on two sisters that were sex experts. One was a urologist and one was, I think, a psychologist. And they talked about women and sex in ways that I had never heard before. And so I started listening and reading more about them and what they did. I started reading books and really confronted things head on. And I actually got to the point where I finally experienced pleasure and an orgasm and actually really enjoyed sex, but the marriage was still really bad. And so we ended up divorcing. Fast forward, I met my husband and, one of the questions he asked current husband, yes, Kevin. And, right when we were getting married, he was like, do you like sex? And I was like, yes, I do. And we talked very openly about sex before we got married. We saved that part of our relationship until after we were actually married, but it was something that was important to both of us and something that we have consistently worked on to make an important part of our relationship throughout our marriage. So when I found coaching in 2017, I was originally coaching women who were struggling in their marriage and contemplating divorce. And I found that many women were struggling with sex in their marriage, and that's why it was so hard. And one weekend I was with a bunch of girlfriends on a little retreat, and the subject of sex came up like it often does. And I started talking. I had a lot of knowledge because I had been studying for so long. And they said, Amanda, you have to change your niche to sex because we've learned more from you in a weekend than we have in 20 years of marriage. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. But I felt very strongly that maybe this is my path. And I came home and I talked to my husband about it and he was okay with it. And so that's what I did. And my business kind of just exploded from there. That was right before COVID. So we had all these women who were stuck in the house with their husbands going, hey, he wants to have sex all the time and I don't, and we got to fix this. So that's when my business kind of exploded, but it's been such a great journey.
You have learned a lot, I'm sure, in this road to helping women and men embrace sexuality in positive ways. What are some of the biggest things that you've learned on this journey?
Yeah, I've learned that we don't do a very good job of educating people about sexuality, at least in this country, and in our families, in our religions, and in culture at large. And so there's a lot of people who really don't understand what healthy sexuality is and how to integrate it into their life, much like they integrate other aspects of their life.
I want to go back a little bit.
Yeah.
You said you learned about sex. You're able to orgasm, have pleasure with your ex-husband, but it was not enough to save the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a really key point, I think, really important, which is that sex is so amazing. And it's also not talked about. It's very taboo. I'm glad that there are people like you doing this in a way that's not taboo.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, learning how to have a great sex life is only a part of the whole ingredient list. It's not going to necessarily save a marriage, although it can certainly help
Enhance
a marriage and even
Mm-hmm.
enhance ones that are struggling. But I think that's such a great point that you brought up, though. You started learning this before you were divorced. It wasn't enough to save it, which, again, it sounds like there's a whole lot of other peripheral stuff going on that didn't
Yeah.
sound salvageable. I think is a very important point about a scintillating sex life, a scintillating marriage. It may not save the marriage.
Well, and that's why I think of our 4 foundational cornerstones: identity, intentionality, insight, and intimacy. Intimacy is the last, because if some of those others aren't in place, it may not make a huge difference in making the marriage better. So,
Yeah.
great.
So here you are, you're podcasting, you have lots of listeners and et cetera. You're successful. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah. It's been pretty great.
Tell us what the biggest overall thing is that you've learned.
I think that first we need a good relationship with ourselves. So I think that probably goes with your identity podcast cornerstone.
Absolutely.
I think that's foundational. If you do not have a good relationship with yourself, if you don't have intimacy with yourself, and the way that I define intimacy is that you are known and you are knowing your partner. But if you don't have intimacy with yourself, then it's impossible to have intimacy with a partner.
What does that look like?
That means understanding what your values are, understanding who you are at your core, what your integrity demands. It means knowing what you think and what you believe. I think so many of us just run on autopilot, that we just kind of go through the motions of life and we don't stop and think about, what do I actually think about this? What do I believe about this? And if you're religious, a lot of times we take a lot of those values and beliefs from the religion, but we don't take the time to go, is this actually something that I want to believe, that I want to think about? We've just kind of adopted those instead of truly thinking about them. And I think that's a really important part of it.
And I found that maybe they took partial narratives and amplified that in certain areas, or one person's perspective and amplified that in another area, or they were emotionally and, well, from a human development perspective, they were just not mature enough to totally understand what was being said in a full context. And so made assumptions, made their sexual identity around these very, very, very narrow narratives and ideas. Have you found that?
Yes, absolutely. And we get that from family too.
Family, of course. That's probably the biggest one right there.
Yeah. I mean, we hear different things in the culture and in our families and in religion. And then most of us don't take the time to actually figure out, what do I actually think and believe? And I think that's really important.
Wow. That does sound like, well, at least 2 of our cornerstones, identity, intentionality, requires sitting with yourself. I tell people all the time, this is not crazy, people, to sit down with yourself, have a meeting with yourself, and have a discussion with yourself. Not nuts. You're not psychotic.
Nope.
It's important to run by different scenarios in your head. Hey, what do I think about this? What do I think about that? Come up with your own values, your own ethics, and write them down. Be intentional. And that's what you're saying, Amanda. That's what I'm hearing you say is really the foundation of this fabulous sex life begins with sitting with ourselves for a long period of time and just thinking.
But I think for women especially, sometimes it's more helpful to hear different ideas and then say, I align with that. I don't align with that. I don't align with that. And yes, I can take that. What do you think about that?
Yes, absolutely. So you guys have your 4 cornerstones. My formula for this is awareness. We have to be aware of what we think and believe and feel and all of that. And then we use our agency.
Yes.
So choices to bring ourselves into alignment. So with our integrity. So awareness, agency, and alignment is what I talk about the most. And I think that happens individually and then again in the marriage.
So the awareness is looking at the options that are out there, being aware of ourselves and being aware of what the possibilities are, the lenses to put on for looking at our sexuality, perhaps. And then agency, we're big proponents of agency.
Amanda, do you think that it's harder for women to create their own sexual identity than it is for men, or not? And why?
Yes and no. I think both men and women fall into very much the stereotypes. I mean, of course, you always have people that are outside of the stereotypes, but men fall into it too. Just it looks different than women.
Okay. I could go with that. I think that we just did an episode on women's identity and realizing how hard it is to be a woman today. I mean, it really is, because there's so many expectations that they put on themselves and other people. It's very, very, very difficult. Whereas with men, it does seem to be, in my experience anyway, much more straightforward. And especially regarding the sexual experience, like we don't experience pain. Women might during sex. I mean, and then what do you do with that? How do you interpret pain and pleasure together? It can be really confusing for a woman.
It can be, but there's also, cultural expectations that are put on men that make it really hard for them too. They think that they need to be the sexual one all the time, and that they need to be the leader and know everything. And it often becomes very much about performance, and that's not helpful for them either.
I can go with that.
So what would you say are the most important elements of having a healthy sexual relationship, besides your formula that you talked about, which I love? That's so great.
Yes. So when it comes to healthy sexuality, I always go back to the 6 Principles of Sexual Health by Doug Braun Harvey. Have you talked about those before?
Well, I don't think we specifically have on the podcast. I've written them in my dissertation and other areas, but I don't know that we've done that. So I would love for you to share those.
Okay. That's what I always go back to when people are asking what a healthy sexual relationship looks like, how to teach their kids about healthy sexuality. It always comes back to those. And I think they're so encompassing. So they are consent, non-exploitation, honesty, shared values, protection from STIs, HIV, and unplanned pregnancy, and mutual pleasure. And when you have those things in place, then it's very protective against trauma. And you're much more likely to create a healthy sexual relationship for yourself and as a couple.
So of those, what do you teach first? Or do you just look at all 6 in a relationship?
Well, I mean, all are very important, but we always start with consent, because I think that is the foundation for a healthy sexual relationship. I don't think how many people understand how important consent still is in a marriage relationship. I was scrolling through Instagram just the other day and saw a post by, I don't even know who, saying that it was a woman saying, once you're married, your body is your spouse's, and consent does not belong in marriage. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. That is highly problematic for both men and women. Consent is still very needed, but people don't understand the full extent of consent, that anything after a no is considered coercion. So if a husband initiates and the wife says, not tonight, he's like, oh, come on. It's been so long. Like, I really need this from you. And that's considered coercion. And then it's no longer consensual. Like, that's really not going to create a great sexual relationship. I also talk a lot about Dr. Cami Hurst's dissertation research, where she talks about consenting to unwanted sex, which happens a lot with women. We're kind of finding it like more in like religious women in the United States.
Okay.
Do a lot of consenting to unwanted sex. A lot of people would call this duty sex, right? But they're saying yes, but it's not actually wanted. And so when you're consenting to unwanted sex, there's a lot of things that show up in relationships because of that. PTSD-like symptoms. There's relationship issues, emotional issues, sexual issues, pleasure issues that all come about when women are consenting to unwanted sex. So that consent piece is really important.
Why do they consent if they don't really want it?
A lot of times it's because they think they're supposed to. That's what a good wife does. They do it to manage their husband's emotions. They don't want to deal with the consequences of saying no. So whether that is, frustration, anger, disappointment, pouting, whining, cajoling, withdrawal of love and affection, they don't want to deal with that. That's too hard for them to deal with. And so they do it. There's also the fear that he will turn to pornography or have an affair or leave, and she will be left. I mean, a lot of the women that are in this survey, don't have a lot of education, and they've kind of got married and wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And so they would lose their housing, their financial stability. And so all of this motivates them to say yes to something that they don't actually want.
So what if, I think all that's true. What if the wife experiences ambivalence about who she really is?
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
All those reasons you told me are true. I believe them all. At the same time, these are all reactive responses. Well, I don't want to get kicked out of the house, or my husband to see porn or have an affair. These are all reactive type responses, which are true. I do not doubt these happen.
Which is why agency is so important.
But what
sexual
if
agency.
at the bottom of all of this with the wife is that she has not sat down and figured out her own identity, and she's ambivalent? Because a lot of women, I know you said men have trouble with identity too, and I get that. It seems to me that women have a harder time because they're dealing with so many paradoxes in their life.
Absolutely.
One of them, of many, is sex. And she
even
may
that's
be very
multifaceted.
one of many
Yeah.
paradoxes in a woman's life is sex. And she is ambivalent. And as a result, because she doesn't think about her identity, she doesn't resolve that ambivalent identity, she has these reactive responses that you just said that are all true. She doesn't want these bad things to happen, so therefore she will do duty sex. Does that sound right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Which is why it's foundational for her to understand her identity and have that awareness around herself first. I mean, so much of what I'm coaching women on is being not reactive, but rather like, who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? What do I want to create for myself so that she is not needing to react to things and can actually make choices that align with her integrity. And I think most women want to have a good marriage and have a good sexual relationship. They just don't know how. And so teaching them how to not be reactive and to be proactive in their life is essential for that.
That darn Victorian era that kind of still has great influence today on the way that we view women as supposed to not know.
Right.
Supposed to not use their agency and just submit.
I think Victoria, yes, I would heap blame on her too. However, I don't think Victoria is the only person to blame here, because if you look back through history, through all of history, humankind, it's a pattern that women are in that role that is the nurturer. They raise the children. They are a little bit more in the background. And we're trying to push back against thousands of years of this, including Victoria, which you're right. I totally agree.
Well, you're correct. We're headed to Africa, to Rwanda in a couple of weeks, and we'll be educating women there on healthy sexuality, on trauma, abuse, all of those things, which are such a huge part of that culture. And they know nothing about Victorianism. So so it's a nice thing to say, but you're right. There's a much greater history. I don't know if it's in all cultures, but it's
biologic, DNA oriented women and men, the orientation between them, the two sexes. I think women start out from that standpoint of being the supporter. And what I'm hearing you say, and we agree with you, is that the women really need to learn how to have a proactive voice in their own lives. Now, if they choose to be submissive in the bedroom, hey,
that's their choice.
That more the better, right? But the difference is that they have
They chose.
chosen intentionally to be that submissive person, right? That's the difference, I think, that I'm hearing you get at anyway.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When it comes from a place of agency, then I think that makes a huge difference in the outcomes.
So, language seems to be another area that the women in my research struggled with sexuality. Can you speak to how you help give women language to use? What are some of the things that you teach, the research that you use to back it up, if there is any, on how having language to support that sexual agency is so important?
Well, a lot of what we're doing in coaching is running through scenarios and role plays of what things look like in their relationship. And a lot of times I will have them be their husband because they know exactly what he's going to say.
Nice.
Right?
I like it.
And then I play them and how to speak in ways that are empowered, but still kind, but honest, loving, and compassionate, but not submitting to things that they don't want to. And giving them that language and running through those dialogues and role plays with them, help them see how they can show up differently in ways that are actually going to strengthen the marriage and strengthen them as a person, rather than this compliance that leaves them feeling stuck and trapped and not feeling great.
Can you give us some examples?
Yeah, I'm very curious if you could go through an example of a
Or
role
more
play.
than one, yeah.
Yeah. So let's say, a husband comes home from work and starts putting the moves on, and she's just not there. Okay. And in the past, she might have been like, no, this is not what I want. Leave me alone. Quit touching me. I'm cooking dinner, right? Mm-hmm. And instead, she can say, you know what? I love to be touched by you, but just now is not working for me. Can we do this later? Right? She's expressing that she likes it in certain ways without rebuffing him. Or let's say she's so exhausted after her day and just really not in the mood. Instead of saying, no, absolutely not. Don't you see how tired I am? I just want to go to sleep. Just saying, like, I love you. I can't tonight. Can we plan on tomorrow? And maybe you can do these things to help me tomorrow night so that I have more energy for you.
I love it.
Okay. Another thing, maybe she's just not feeling it. So rather than saying no, saying, entice me.
Ooh,
I like that.
dang.
Okay. Because we know that so many women are responsive desire rather than spontaneous desire. And I actually don't love those terms because I think we're all responsive. Just some people respond a lot faster and easier than others, depending on their accelerators and brakes.
Well, as a man, I might take a little issue with that, but I get your point. I understand what you're saying.
But like, if you can be open to being touched, and it becomes a place where you can say, entice me. Let's see where it goes. Right. And maybe it doesn't go anywhere. And then you have to have the strength to say, you know what? Thank you so much for trying, but this is really not working for me. And not feel like just because he's tried that you have to do something that you don't want to do.
I love that.
Wow.
That is fantastic, because women do carry around a lot of baggage from a lot of things that have happened at work, at parenting, managing, a lot of different things. So that's great language.
I think, though, I love the entice me thing. I think, though, they probably need to be in a certain headspace that may, which I'm sure you teach. But I mean, but hey, it's an option, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
I think that.
Well, entice me doesn't mean I have to go to the headspace.
Yeah.
Entice me means convince me that this.
I'm at least in a headspace that's a little bit curious.
Yeah.
And you're not quite there yet, but
and then,
I like it.
You're willing to try.
It leaves that door open just a little bit for the husband.
I mean, I hear a lot from husbands how painful it is for them to be rejected over and over and over. And I feel for that. And I think that, women often feel like it has to be either a yes or a no. Mm-hmm. And when we can say, no, but I'm willing to try, or like, no, but can we plan for another time?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to follow through, right? It can't just be this perpetual pushing them off, but really getting to the space where like, let's stay connected even in the no.
Okay. Like
That,
what?
that's really good. That was great.
Yeah. Just I'm not feeling it tonight, but I would love to snuggle.
There you go.
Right? That's a way to stay connected. Like I really don't feel like penetrative sex, but I am open to giving you a blowjob or a hand job. Like you get to decide where that line is. Like when we define sex so narrowly as like penetrative sex, intercourse, we lose so much possibility.
Right.
And so, like I would not be open to sex, but I would love to just have a good makeout session. Like there's so much possibility there that can help you stay connected without it going all the way if you're not ready for that.
Hey, everybody. This conversation with Amanda Lauder has been so rich that we didn't want to rush it, so we're splitting it into 2 parts. In this first half, we laid the foundation for self-awareness, agency, and the 6 pillars of sexual health. But there's so much more ahead. In part 2, we'll dive deeper into the real-life application, what consent looks like inside of marriage, and how to build emotional safety, and also how to communicate desire without fear or guilt. So if today sparked something in you, don't miss out on the next episode. We're just getting started.